These are 5 big name wide receivers that you must avoid in fantasy football this season. Before we get into it, grab your coffee, we got an energy drink, White Monster, and let's jump into it. Starting with Puka Nacua, who is coming off a historic season where he broke the rookie record in receptions and yardage and scored the 3rd most PPR points by a rookie receiver in NFL history, along with finishing as a top 12 wide receiver in 9 out of 17 games. Only Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb had more top 12 finishes, as they each had 10 apiece. Now, don't get me wrong, Puka is set up for another strong season. I just don't think he's worth a top 10 pick in fantasy drafts, and here is why. Puka averaged 15.7 fantasy points per game when Kupp was on the field last year, and 21.9 when Kupp was out. Here's where the concern lies. In the 12 games that they both played together, their numbers are very similar, as they both nearly had the same amount of targets and fantasy points per game when they were both on the field. We know the relationship that Cooper Kupp has with Matthew Stafford. Heck, he's a former Triple Crown winner. Kupp still commanded a 23.4% target share, sporting 2+ yards per route run, and was the wide receiver 23 in fantasy points per game. So just by looking at those numbers, Cooper Kupp isn't cooked yet. Yes, he's older. He had 2 really unfortunate injury-riddled seasons, but what happens if Kupp stays healthy this year? I think Kupp is going to have a massive bounce-back year because, like I just said, what happened last season was more of a product of injuries than it was of his decline in his production. Because when Kupp was on the field last year, we saw his ceiling, which is he can throw up 8 to 10 catches, 100+ receiving yards, and a touchdown. He can very well do that consistently this year. So that being said, I'd personally much rather draft Kupp in round 4 than take a chance on spending a round 1 pick, a top 10 pick on Puka Nacua, who we still have a small sample size from. He was a rookie last year. Could he have a little bit of a sophomore slump? Absolutely. Do I think he's going to fall off the face of the earth? No. But that being said, it wouldn't shock me in the slightest if Kupp outperformed Puka in fantasy points per game this year because of everything that I just mentioned. More importantly, the connection that he has with Stafford. They're really good friends. I don't see a world where if Kupp and Puka are both on the field consistently this year, where Puka in every single game is the main target. I just don't think that that happens. And when you're spending a top 10 pick on him, you are expecting him to crush Kupp in every metric this year, and I just don't see it happening. I feel like we're drafting Puka at his ceiling, and we're really kind of fading Kupp harder than we should. Like I said, I think he's going to have a really big bounce back year, and I just prefer taking the better value. In terms of a top 10 pick, instead of drafting Puka, there's a lot of talent on the board. Give me A.J. Brown over Puka. Give me Jahmyr Gibbs. Give me Garrett Wilson. Give me Saquon Barkley. There's safer players who I have higher ceilings going in Puka's range, which makes Puka an easy fade for me at cost. All right, to my next receiver, Davante Adams. Let's really focus on what happened last year and talk about how it could change or how it could get worse this season. Last year was the first season since 2015 that Adams didn't finish as a top 12 fantasy receiver. All the years that he was going bonkers with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, and then his only season with Derek Carr in Vegas, he still had a monster year. Last year was different because he didn't have a quarterback. Now, is that going to change this year? No, but let's dig into it. Last year, his targets per route, yards per route run were his worst mark since 2017. Like I said, a lot of that can be blamed on poor quarterback play, whether it was Jimmy Garoppolo, Aiden O'Connell. They were responsible for the 12th highest off-target rate. They were horrible. Adams was frustrated for most of the year. You saw it on Receiver on Netflix. He was not happy. Adams only went over 100 yards 3 times last year, and in 2 of those games, it required 20 targets to get him there because of inefficient quarterback play. Adams on the year saw 175 targets, which was second in the league behind only CeeDee Lamb, and he still finished only as the wide receiver 15 in fantasy points per game. If that's not a red flag, you guys, I don't know what is, because Adams is getting older, entering his age 32 season, but more importantly, he still doesn't have a quarterback. It's going to be Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, both probably below average quarterbacks this season. It's going to be another year of tough sledding for the future Hall of Famer. And on top of all that, he's going to have more target competition this year as Vegas spent a first-round pick on stud tight end Brock Bowers. His ADP is just way too rich for my blood with all of these risks that I just mentioned. He's going 18th overall on Sleeper. That's a round 2 pick. That is an easy fade at cost for me. I would much rather have Marvin Harrison Jr. if he falls. Kyren Williams. I'm even down on Kyren, but I'd rather have Kyren than Davante. Or gimme Drake London, who is going to explode in a new system with Kirk Cousins. All right, to my next receiver, Malik Nabers. These LSU wide receivers, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Malik Nabers, there's got to be something in the water because they are just built different. Nabers is coming off an electric final year at LSU, finishing with 89 receptions for over 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns. He's a big play machine that can line up all over the field. He's elite after the catch. He's pretty much Jamar Chase 2.0. He was the second wide receiver selected off the board in this year's draft. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. went first. If this was any other draft, Malik Nabers would have been the first wide receiver off the board. He was selected 6th overall to the New York Giants, and I will never forget that video of Malik Nabers being dropped off at the Giants facility days after being drafted, and the disappointment on his face. You could just feel he just knew what he was walking into because of the quarterback play. He had an opportunity to be in sunny San Diego with one of the best quarterbacks, gunslinger Justin Herbert, but he stuck with mediocre Daniel Jones coming off a torn ACL. Daniel Jones has yet to reach 7 yards per pass attempt in any of his first 5 NFL seasons, along with never throwing for more than 3,200 yards. This is not a quarterback, you guys. This is not an NFL caliber quarterback. I'm honestly shocked that New York is rolling him out again. I know it's probably a money and a contract issue, but this is going to be a disaster again. In the 6 games that Daniel Jones played last year, he was terrible. He was dismal. 70% passer rating with only 2 touchdown passes and 6 interceptions. Elite wide receivers can't make horrible quarterbacks better. We should have learned this lesson last year with Drake London and Desmond Ridder. And Malik Nabers is an even better talent than Drake London. But where you have to draft Nabers if you want him this year is 38th overall in Sleeper. That's a round 4 selection. That is still way too rich for my blood when his ceiling is going to be absolutely capped by what will be probably one of the worst offenses in football again. So they're not going to move the ball. They're not going to be in scoring position often. And then you have Daniel Jones, who is just a horrendous quarterback. He can't even hit the broadside of a barn if he wanted to, if his life depended on it. It's going to be a disaster. I want nothing to do with this Giants offense. And there's just plenty of better options with more upside and less risk going in round 4. Give me Lamar Jackson, Jalen Waddle, Cooper Kupp, who we just talked about, DK Metcalf, who's going to have a huge year, Devontae Smith, Trey McBride, who's my tight end 1. Nabers is an easy fade for me at cost. All right, to my next receiver, Stefon Diggs has crumbled, disappeared down the stretch in back-to-back years. It's been horrible to watch. If you have been a Diggs owner, it's been insanely frustrating. In his final 7 games in 2022, Diggs only logged 1 100-yard receiving game with 1.95 yards per route run, telling you back in 2022, 2 years ago, that he is already starting to decline as a player. And then last year from weeks 10 to 18, he was the wide receiver 45 or higher in 6 out of those 8 games, finishing as the wide receiver 52 over that stretch. Along with only having 1 game over 80 receiving yards, that's just mind-blowing to me. On top of that, Diggs has been attached to one of the best quarterbacks over his last 4 seasons in Buffalo in Josh Allen, and he still couldn't get it done. I mean, last year he had no one really competing for targets with him. Gabe Davis, Dalton Kincaid was a rookie. Diggs has seen 154 targets in all 4 seasons in Buffalo. So if he can't get it done being the top target with one of the best quarterbacks in the league on what was a pretty good offense last year, What makes you think that going to Houston is going to be a better situation? No, it's insanely worse. He joins a potent Houston offense attached to CJ Stroud, so he gets another elite quarterback. That's great. We love to see that. But now he has to deal with the most target competition of his career in Nico Collins and Tank Dell. He's the wide receiver 3 on this team this year. The soon-to-be 31-year-old won't come close to 150 targets this year. I'll be shocked if he cracks 100. Diggs honestly looks like probably the 3rd best wide receiver on Houston right now. Maybe that's a hot take. Maybe it's not. But he's not going to be this elite target earner that he has in the past because of his age, because of his target competition, because he's on a completely new team, and because of the decline in his play that we've seen over the last 2 years. He's not the same guy. So you're telling me with all those things considered, Diggs is still a round 3 pick? He's one of the worst values in all of fantasy football right now. Give me Isaiah Pacheco over Diggs, who's going in a similar range. Jalen Hurts, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, plenty of other better options. All right, to my last receiver, Deebo Samuel, who's coming off a really nice year. Wide receiver 12 in fantasy points per game. He scored 12 total touchdowns thanks to his rushing ability. 5 of those came on the ground. But unfortunately, he's obviously a touchdown regression candidate this year after scoring the 2nd most touchdowns of his career. And we know relying on rushing production can be very unpredictable from year to year, especially when, a guy named Christian McCaffrey is in the backfield. And what's concerning for me is what if his rushing numbers as he enters his age 28 season decline this year? You can't really rely on strong receiving production either, as he only saw 89 targets last year and only has 1 season in 5 years where he saw more than 100 targets. And a big reason for that is he has a lot of competition for targets in Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, and now San Francisco brings in 1st-round receiver Ricky Pearsall. Furthermore, Samuel has an extensive injury history because of his physical playing style. So this is a guy where you're banking on rushing production, which isn't guaranteed every year. He has a lot of competition for targets on a loaded San Francisco offense. He's pretty inconsistent with his play. He's one of those guys that will blow up and then do nothing the following week, blow up, etc. So he's very unpredictable. And then on top of that, he's injured a lot. He's leaving for a quarter, coming back because of his playing style, which I just talked about. So he's one of the riskier players to draft in fantasy, and he's a better real-life receiver than fantasy receiver. He's very stressful to own. And yes, he has those big, exciting plays, but it's just not worth it for me when you can draft similar guys that we just talked about going in this range. Isaiah Pacheco, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle are all better selections in round 3. So those are my 5 receivers that I think you should absolutely avoid in fantasy football drafts this year at cost. That's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, if you got something out of it, please make sure to subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, share with your friends, and I will see you in the next one.